Colonel Elena Cruz stood at the broad observation window of the Norcom Command Center, breathing in a moment of calm before her next briefing. The command center was an impressive facility carved into the side of a mountain, outfitted with the best surveillance and tactical systems Earth's allied powers could gather. Rows of monitors displayed everything from local radar scans to global communications channels, each blinking with coded messages or open feeds. Until recently, Elena had considered the assignment straightforward. Monitor world activity, watch for any sign of illegal nuclear development or rogue militaries, and maintain a vigilant guard against terrestrial threats. She never once believed her role would extend beyond Earth, or that an extraterrestrial menace was even conceivable. Yet the past week had brought whispers of unverified signals at the fringes of the planet's satellite coverage, fleeting images that defied easy explanation. Elena, like most of her colleagues, assumed these anomalies were due to sensor malfunctions or cosmic interference. But there was a palpable tension in the air tonight, the sense that something monumental was about to happen. She glanced at the digital clock on the wall. 20 minutes until the scheduled debrief with General Richard Donovan. Most of her staff had retired for the night, though the main ops room remained manned by a skeleton crew. Officially, there was no high alert, but Elena had ordered a precautionary team to stay behind. Even if it was paranoia, she wanted to be ready for anything. She took one last sip of coffee, lukewarm, a typical annoyance of night shifts, then turned toward the corridor leading to the briefing suite. The hallway lights buzzed overhead, casting her shadow in a rigid line along the floor, and her footsteps echoed back at her. She forced herself to remain calm, professional, disciplined. Something about those anomalies was crawling under her skin. When Elena entered the small briefing room, she saw Donovan already seated at the wide table, studying a series of satellite images under the glow of a single lamp. Dressed in fatigues, hair kept short, General Donovan had eyes that spoke of decades of combat experience. He looked up as she approached. "Colonel," he said quietly, "sit. We need to talk." She complied, noting the tension in his shoulders. He tapped a few times on a tablet, projecting magnified pictures onto the wall. The images showed a patch of stars, blackness, and a faint shape that could be debris or an asteroid. Donovan leaned forward. "That," he said, "is not from around here." Before she could ask what he meant, he flicked to another slide. A closer shot, revealing a large, angular structure floating in space, partially obscured by static. "We've had conflicting signals for over a week," he continued, "but intelligence now suspects these are ships, large ones, stationed just beyond high orbit." Elena's heart hammered. Ships? From whom? She could hardly say the word alien aloud, but it hovered in the room. Donovan sighed. "We have no terrestrial explanation. They're not satellites we launched. The design is completely unknown. If we're right, they've been positioning themselves around Earth, staying quiet. The question is why." A silence stretched between them. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine, as if invisible fingers traced the edges of her nerves. If there was an extraterrestrial presence in orbit, all the old science fiction nightmares might be about to come true. Donovan's gaze turned grim. "I want all global defense networks on standby. Quietly. I don't want to start panic. But if they move on us, we need to be prepared." Elena nodded, already mentally reorganizing her staff. "Yes, sir," she said. "But do we warn the public?" Donovan shook his head. "Not yet. We don't have enough intel. Let's hope this is just a close encounter of the harmless kind." Events proved otherwise before dawn broke. Elena was on her way back to the main ops room when the first alarm blared, a shrill klaxon that signified an inbound threat. She sprinted, adrenaline surging, as voices crackled across comm lines. Radar contacts accelerating rapidly, dropping into lower orbit, and distributing themselves over multiple key points across the globe. She burst into the ops center to find screens lighting up with urgent data. "Colonel," shouted Lieutenant Harvey, a junior officer at the comm station, "we're seeing atmospheric entry signatures in clusters. Something huge is descending." It's like his voice died as a feed from a weather satellite came up. Fireballs streaking across the horizon, each trailing a superheated path through the atmosphere. The entire planet's early warning systems were going crazy, from NORAD to foreign counterparts. Then the unthinkable happened. The overhead screens flickered red, each one showing different angles of the same disaster. In multiple major cities, New York, Tokyo, Paris, Johannesburg, columns of vivid red light smashed into the ground, unleashing shockwaves that flattened buildings. A single beam erased Times Square in an instant, leaving a glowing crater where blocks of concrete and steel had once stood. Emergency responders tried to mount a rescue, but more beams lanced down across the hemisphere, cutting swaths of destruction as if the planet were being systematically targeted. Elena witnessed these horrors in real time, chest tight, throat dry. This was not random. It was a coordinated barrage on civilian population centers. She heard a single word repeated by the computer's automated voice: orbital bombardment. Orbital bombardment. Donovan had arrived beside her, face pale. "Dear God," he muttered. "They're attacking." Elena swallowed hard, remembering the images of that alien ship in orbit. Her hands clenched into fists. "Scramble all remaining satellites we have left," she ordered, voice trembling with controlled anger. "Try to get a read on their position, their capabilities. Alert every major defense institution on the globe." Donovan nodded and barked commands into a handheld radio, but they both knew the damage was already done. The slaughter had begun. Within the hour, the skies grew a hazy red as dust, debris, and the aftereffects of high-energy strikes filtered through the atmosphere. The media, what little remained functional, began broadcasting chaotic messages, urging people to take shelter. Nations' leaders pleaded for calm, but entire communication grids were going dark under the relentless assault. Elena found herself at the center of a half-collapsed chain of command, coordinating with battered military units. Many of Earth's top cities were gone in a single night of horror. She couldn't wrap her mind around the scale of devastation. "They're treating us like pests," one of her subordinates whispered, voice cracking. "Like they're exterminating insects." Elena tried to maintain composure. "We need a plan," she said, even as her own heart felt near bursting. "General, we have to regroup. Underground bunkers, hidden facilities. We can't fight them in the open. Not with that kind of orbital superiority." Donovan nodded, though his eyes were hollow. "We'll gather every soldier we can reach, every scientist. We're going to war." Her mind spun with the enormity of it. An unknown alien force. Superior technology. The casual erasure of millions of human lives. Fear warred with fury inside her, and fury won out. She wouldn't stand by and watch Earth be sterilized from orbit. She refused. They began an exodus to the old subterranean fortress beneath the Rockies, known as Bunker Prime. Once intended to withstand nuclear attacks, it now had to be humanity's shield against an extraterrestrial foe. As Elena climbed aboard a reinforced helicopter with a small squad of survivors, she got her last glimpse of the world above. Fires raged on the horizon, choking the sky with thick smoke. A sense of finality hit her. There was no going back to the Earth she once knew. In her headset, scattered radio transmissions spoke of monstrous warships hovering in low orbit, dispatching smaller craft to secure strategic sites. The Earth was being strangled, and it had only begun. They made it to Bunker Prime by dawn, the helicopter weaving around scorched farmland and crashed aerial vehicles. The bunker's blast doors opened on approach, letting the helicopter descend into a cavernous interior that had once been used for nuclear containment exercises. Military trucks, ambulances, and ragtag convoys of civilians lined the interior. Elena's group stepped off into a scene of chaos and heartbreak. Wounded men and women lying on cots, volunteers distributing water, medical staff trying to organize triage. She saw a child wandering aimlessly, face streaked with tears, searching for someone who probably was never coming. And yet, amidst this heartbreak, there was an undercurrent of defiance. Many faces she passed carried the same hardened resolve. If the aliens thought humans were insects, they'd find out insects could fight back. Elena and Donovan navigated the swirling chaos until they reached a command post set up in a corner of the bunker's main chamber. Temporary walls cordoned off the area, providing minimal privacy. Inside, a cluster of officers pored over digital maps displayed on portable screens powered by diesel generators. They glanced up as she and Donovan entered, saluting or nodding in recognition. Donovan got straight to the point. We need a status update on global forces, plus any intel on the aliens. Colonel Cruz is taking over as our operations coordinator. Elena raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. She was ready to shoulder responsibility if it meant saving Earth. A wiry intelligence officer, Captain Yara Fields, tapped a laptop. Sir, reports are coming in from all over. Satellite coverage is spotty, but appears we're facing multiple capital ships in orbit. Each one is capable of unleashing city-leveling beams. Smaller craft have landed in dozens of locations. We suspect they're setting up forward bases, maybe to track down survivors or gather resources. Our nuclear arsenal is effectively neutralized because they knock out our ICBMs before they exit the atmosphere. We can't even see them on radar until they're ready to fire. Elena inhaled. So they command the sky, and we can't launch anything. That means we have to fight them underground or in hidden zones where their big guns can't safely strike without risking friendly fire or losing intel. Captain, do we have any sense of their biology, their structure? Fields shook her head. Only scraps of eyewitness accounts. Some mention tall, bipedal forms with chitinous plating, segmented limbs, advanced energy weapons. They're not just blowing up our cities from orbit, they're also dispatching ground troops. Donovan ran a hand over his face. We have to prepare for infiltration. That means fortifying a network of bunkers, tunnels, anything underground. And we need to figure out a way to strike back. Elena nodded. Guerrilla tactics. Hit and run. We isolate small groups of them, salvage any technology we can, and adapt it for our own use. That last phrase echoed in her mind. Adapt. Humanity's greatest strength might be its capacity to learn under extreme pressure. In the face of annihilation, they had no other choice. In the following days, Bunker Prime turned into a nexus of the Western resistance. Civilians were evacuated deeper into the mountain, while the upper levels became a hive of activity for troops, scientists, and engineers. Elena spent hours combing through map data, coordinating with a ring of bunkers across the continent through encrypted shortwave radio. They traded information about alien patrol routes, best ambush strategies, and rumors of captured alien devices. Word of success stories trickled in. A militia group in rural Russia downed a smaller alien craft using improvised rocket launchers. A Chinese unit reportedly captured an alien trooper alive. The more they fought, the more humanity discovered that these so-called superior beings were not invincible. Elena organized a scouting mission to the ruins of a major airport rumored to host an alien supply drop. She handpicked the team. Sergeant Adam Parker, a hardened Marine with a knack for infiltration. Specialist Tina Nguyen, an electronics expert who had once worked at NASA. And Private Simon Huang, a quiet but deadly sharpshooter. They left the bunker under the cover of night, traveling by modified truck that ran almost silently on repurposed electric motors. The roads were pitted and cracked, filled with debris. Ghostly cityscapes flickered in the distance, half lit by fires. At one point, they spotted a sweeping beam of red light in the sky, presumably an orbital strike demolishing another location. When they reached the outskirts of the airport, they encountered their first sign of alien ground presence. A pair of spindly, insect-like mech patrolling the perimeter. The mech stood 3 meters high, with segmented legs and mounted energy cannons. Their movements were eerily precise. Parker brought the truck to a halt behind the wreckage of a collapsed overpass. Elena and Huang slipped out quietly, scanning the runway area with night vision goggles. Dozens of smaller craft were arranged in neat rows. Alien lights pulsed across them, and silhouettes of armoring squads scurried under the wing-like hulls, carrying crates or hooking up cables to portable generators that glowed in a faint turquoise hue. They're establishing a forward base, Tina whispered, leaning forward from the truck's interior. Looks like they're offloading supplies, maybe even building more advanced infrastructure. They decided to approach via a drainage canal that ran parallel to the runway. Crouching in the damp darkness, they moved slowly, pausing whenever one of the mech's scanning lights swept overhead. The tension was suffocating, hearts pounding with each step on the slimy concrete. At last, they found a vantage point behind some shipping containers. Simon set up a scope for a closer look. From there, they could see a group of chitinous aliens, each about 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs and armor-like plates covering their torsos. Their mandibles clicked faintly, emitting a language that reminded Elena of radio static blended with insect chatter. One alien carried a device that projected holographic controls. Occasionally, it would tap something, and a new string of alien glyphs appeared. Adam Parker took aim with a silenced rifle, an older ballistic weapon fitted with a scavenged alien power cell that Tina had ingeniously adapted. Could disable the guard over there, he muttered, but Elena motioned for him to wait. She wanted more intel, not a firefight that might draw reinforcements. From behind the containers, Tina carefully slipped out a small reconnaissance drone, repurposed from a children's toy, but equipped with cameras. The drone buzzed to life and rose a few feet, whirring softly as it hovered above the crates. The feed transmitted back to a handheld console, images of alien crates, each labeled with strange sigils. Some contained what looked like shimmering rods, possibly ammunition or power packs. They were about to pull back when an alarm screeched from the far side of the runway. One of the mechs had discovered footprints or a heat signature. It emitted a piercing tone, and the patrol of aliens snapped to attention, brandishing slender rifles. Red dots flickered, scanning the area. Elena cursed under her breath. "We're compromised. Adam, take out that mech sensor array. Huang, cover him. Tina, get ready to move if we see an opening." Adam exhaled, aimed at the mech's head-like sensor cluster, and squeezed the trigger. The improvised bullet laser hybrid slammed into the mech, sending sparks flying. The machine staggered, its scanning beam flickering. Instantly, the aliens returned fire. A bolt of brilliant green energy erupted from one of their rifles, vaporizing a portion of the container. Elena felt the heat wave scorch her cheek. Chaos erupted. Huang picked off the nearest alien with a single shot to the neck plates. The creature fell backward, purple fluid spraying. Another alien hissed, brandishing a handheld cannon, but Tina lobbed an improvised EMP grenade that crackled with electricity upon detonation, shorting out the alien's weapon. They dashed behind a half-collapsed container as more energy bolts streaked past. Sparks ran around them. The smell of ozone and burnt metal filled Elena's nostrils. "We can't hold them off," she yelled. "Adam, do we have a path back?" He peeked around the corner, then waved urgently. "Runway's blocked, but we can circle wide along the wrecked terminal. Might have to sprint." They made their break, weaving through twisted metal beams and scattered luggage carts. The aliens were organized and alarmingly quick, but the humans used the environment to their advantage, slipping through tight gaps. By the time they reached the edge of the drainage canal, the mechs had regrouped, scanning for them again. Elena's team slid down the canal embankment, hearts pounding, adrenaline spiking. The plan had been to observe, not engage, but the partial success was that they now had clear data on the alien supply setup. Not to mention, they'd tested their new hybrid weaponry in live combat and survived. They returned to Bunker Prime hours later, exhausted but alive. Tina quickly offloaded the drone footage onto the command center systems, giving them a glimpse of the aliens' logistical operations. Elena, Donovan, and a cadre of analysts pored over the frames, a hodgepodge of new details about the aliens' glyphs, their power sources, and their specialized gear. "We might be able to replicate some of that," Tina said, pointing to the turquoise generators. "Or at least cause a feedback loop if we find one to sabotage." Donovan nodded solemnly. "We'll incorporate this into our ongoing plan." Soon, stories like theirs became the backbone of human resistance. Groups across the world reported similar findings, each raid yielding bits of alien tech. The knowledge was painstakingly shared. Some managed to salvage entire alien rifles, though only a fraction could figure out how to recharge or use them effectively. Step by step, humanity adapted. Engineers learned how to fortify bunkers against energy strikes. Scientists discovered partial ways to scramble alien sensors. The once invincible threat was slowly being forced to reveal its vulnerabilities. Weeks into the invasion, an extraordinary breakthrough occurred. A Russian militia destroyed a smaller alien craft, capturing the cockpit mostly intact. They transmitted schematics to Bunker Prime, and Tina cross-referenced them with data from their own encounters. She spent countless sleepless nights deciphering glyphs until, at last, she had a revelation. The aliens used a universal command interface that included a backdoor for emergency overrides. If one could decipher those codes, it might be possible to seize control of alien craft or force them to shut down. This became the single most critical project in the bunker. Elena noticed how morale began to shift. People were still grieving massive losses. Entire cities had been lost. The casualties numbered in the hundreds of millions. Despite that, a spark of defiance cut through the gloom. The battered forces were no longer stumbling in the dark. They had a purpose: to show these so-called exterminators that humans weren't insects, but a species capable of hitting back. Even as the aliens continued to devastate the planet from orbit, more humans sought refuge underground, forging alliances that defied old national rivalries. The black market was replaced by a worldwide exchange of precious resources for survival. There were no more petty divisions. Everybody was in the same boat, fighting for Earth. The momentum for a bold plan grew unstoppable. Donovan and Elena hammered out a high-risk strategy: seize an alien landing craft, retrofit it with jerry-rig components, and punch through the blockade into orbit. From there, they would either sabotage or destroy the main alien battleship leading the extermination. The main question was how to accomplish such a feat with limited resources and time. The enemy still had overwhelming superiority. We used their arrogance against them, Elena told the Leadership Council one tense evening. They think we're disorganized, technologically backward. They leave small vulnerabilities in their ground defenses. We exploit those. We get their codes. We board one of their craft. We do the impossible. The plan, codenamed Operation Nightfall, centered on the newly discovered maintenance outpost near a ruined space center. Intelligence indicated the aliens were storing several troop transports and a mid-sized landing craft there, presumably for planetary sweeps. The site had fewer guards than the major supply stations, possibly because the aliens saw Earth's resistance as negligible. Under cloak of darkness and electronic jamming, a specialized strike team would infiltrate, neutralize the guards, and fly off with the landing craft. Donovan insisted Elena lead the operation personally. She tried to hide her nervousness behind determination. Her entire life had been building towards some form of conflict, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined hijacking an alien ship. The night of the mission was starless, as though the sky itself had been smothered. A ragtag fleet of modified trucks dropped Elena's strike force a few kilometers from the alien outpost. She split them into smaller squads, each assigned a different infiltration route. Adam Parker took point with the heavy hitters, while Tina and Simon accompanied Elena for stealth infiltration. They wore black camouflage suits embedded with minimal reflective patterns to avoid detection. Overhead, they could hear the distant hum of patrolling alien mechs. The ground was littered with rubble from destroyed satellites that had once orbited the planet. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. Humanity's own attempts at exploring space lay in twisted shards at her feet, overshadowed by a menace from the stars. They crawled through drainage ditches and collapsed tunnels, eventually emerging behind a perimeter fence. Several blocky alien structures stood within a crater-like clearing, each faintly illuminated by the pulsing turquoise lights. A large transport craft, shaped like a curved shell, loomed at the center. Alien guards patrolled the walkways. One carried a staff-like device that glowed at the tip, scanning the area. Elena signaled her team to hold. She crouched behind a broken concrete slab and listened carefully. The alien's language was a buzz-click hiss, but she picked out certain repeated patterns. Tina carried a small translator gadget they'd been hacking together from stolen data. She switched it on, letting the device attempt real-time translation. Only partial words emerged. Sector, secure. Humans, pests, no threat. Elena's jaw clenched. Good, she thought. Keep underestimating us. Careful timing allowed them to approach the landing craft undetected. The aliens guarding the ramp seemed oddly casual, as if bored by their assignment. Tina prepared an EMP device that could knock out the ship's immediate security locks for a short window. Adam's squad was supposed to cause a diversion on the other side of the outpost, drawing away the patrol mechs. Then, with the few seconds of confusion, Elena's group would storm the ramp, seal the hatch, and hope to high heaven that Tina could start the engines using their partial code cracks. The tension mounted, each breath a countdown. Then a muffled explosion erupted on the far side of the compound. Lights flashed red, a siren wailed, and the guards barked in their alien dialect, rushing to investigate. That was the signal. Elena and Simon burst forward, crossing open ground in a flurry of motion. One guard remained at the ramp. Simon's rifle coughed quietly, dropping the alien before it could fire back. They scrambled up the ramp and found themselves inside a cavernous hold. The interior walls had an organic quality, with rib-like supports that pulsed with embedded energy lines. There was an immediate stench of chemicals and the faint hum of alien machinery. Tina rushed to the cockpit door, working the alien keypad with data gleaned from countless hours of cryptanalysis. For a breathless moment, the door refused to budge, then hissed open, releasing a blast of pressurized air. Inside, the cockpit was a tangle of curved screens, glowing glyphs, and semi-organic controls. The team spilled in, forcing two startled alien pilots to stand down at gunpoint. The aliens' mandibles clicked an alarm, but they complied, possibly never expecting humans to penetrate this deeply. Tina shoved a translator into the nearest alien's face. Deactivate external locks. Now, the alien stared with large compound eyes, either refusing or not understanding. Elena leveled her weapon at its chest plating. Do it, she barked. The alien finally keyed a sequence on its console, and an overhead display flashed. The main ramp started to close with a heavy groan. They were sealed inside, presumably safe from outside reinforcements for the moment. Tina hustled the aliens into a corner, where Adam's squad joined them moments later. We've got hostiles inbound, Adam reported, wiping sweat from his brow. They're onto us, but I rigged a few charges near the ammo stockpile. That should hold them off. Elena nodded. Tina, can you pilot this thing? The tech specialist bit her lip, scanning the controls. The principles are the same as that Russian schematic. We just need to find the thrust mechanism, figure out the artificial gravity controls, override any remote sabotage protocols. No big deal, right? She keyed in a code sequence, and the entire vessel rumbled, lights flickering to life along the floor. The hum intensified. Looks like we're in business, she said, voice shaking with exhilaration. Outside, more alien troops were converging. Several mechs fired at the ship's hull, but the interior sensors displayed only minor structural readings. The craft was designed for atmospheric entry, so it was tough enough to handle some ground fire. Elena gave the order to lift off. The ship shuddered, rising unsteadily at first. Then a wave of dizziness struck them as the inertial dampeners kicked in. Tina wrestled with the controls. It's like driving an octopus, she muttered, pressing glyphs that glowed in response. But the transport rose above the compound, clearing the perimeter. A volley of green energy bolts shot upward from the frantic alien defenders, but the transport's own minor shielding deflected them. Finally, with a roar of engines that no human had ever piloted before, they blasted skyward. The climb into the upper atmosphere was chaotic. Tina's improvised understanding of the control system meant the vessel jerked and pitched, occasionally spinning. The humans strapped themselves into alien harnesses wherever they could, clenching their teeth as G-forces threatened to crush them. The few captured aliens cowered in a corner, their eyes wide with terrified confusion. Through a viewport in the cockpit, Elena glimpsed the curve of Earth below, a patchwork of darkness and flickers of destructive light from continuing orbital bombardments. But they were leaving that behind. The plan was now, impossibly, in motion. They would push through the blockade, or die trying. Sure enough, as they neared low orbit, sensors blared. Inbound energy signatures. Adam called, his voice barely audible over the alarms. Tina, checked a readout. We got TOW, 3 interceptors on approach vector. Elena snarled, adrenaline flooding her system. Is there a weapon system we can use? Tina jammed her hand onto a control pad. Yes, but it's minimal. Some forward plasma cannons. The interceptors are probably better armed. The craft lurched as an energy beam grazed their hull. A console exploded in a shower of sparks, and overhead lights flickered. Return fire, Elena shouted, not entirely sure how. Tina hammered a sequence of glyphs. An external camera feed showed 3 sleek alien fighters, each spitting bright neon lances in rapid bursts. The transport responded with a single purple plasma shot that streaked out and clipped one fighter's wing. The alien craft spun away, venting gas. The other 2 tightened their formation, continuing to rake the stolen ship with punishing beams. Inside, half the displays flickered red. The shield readouts looked dangerously low. Simon cursed as he tried to keep one alien pilot from interfering. The pilot shrieked at him in its native tongue, mandibles vibrating. The second pilot stared at the console helplessly. Another strike rocked the ship, and an alarm wailed with ear-splitting intensity. We're losing altitude, Tina warned. We'll burn up if we don't, she froze, eyes flicking across a line of glyphs. I might have an idea, she said, voice trembling. We can hack the interceptor's command protocols if we can isolate their ID signals. The code sequences, they might be universal across all their vessels. It's a long shot, but Elena nodded rapidly. Do it. The ship took another hit. Sparks flew. A panel behind them burst into flames, and Adam rushed to smother it with a fire blanket. Tina typed frantically. Each keystroke on the alien console made a beep or whir. For a tense half-minute, the transport lurched and shuddered under repeated hits. Then, abruptly, the interceptors stopped firing. The sensors showed them drifting off course. The overhead feed displayed the fighters. Spinning gently, thrusters dim. Tina exhaled a shaky laugh. It worked. We gave them a self-destruct override signal, like we forced the safety protocols to engage simultaneously. They're paralyzed for now. Elena felt something close to triumph. Get us out of here before they regain control or we get new visitors. The transport, battered and smoking, limped higher, crossing into a stable orbit. Earth's curve glowed behind them, heartbreakingly scarred. Clouds were tinted with the ugly reds and oranges of destruction, but they were out of the immediate danger zone. Now came the next, even more terrifying phase of the plan. They forced the captured alien pilots to guide them toward the main battleship. According to intelligence gleaned from hack data logs, that command vessel was the one orchestrating the planet-wide bombardments. With it neutralized, the aliens' orbital stranglehold might loosen. On approach, they realized the scale of the battleship was even more immense than any satellite feed had suggested. It was many kilometers long, shaped like a monstrous spearhead with a ridged, layered surface. Antenna-like structures bristled along its edges, and docking bays glowed in eerie white. The transport sensors pinged multiple times, presumably as the battleship security system recognized a returning friendly craft. They only had one chance to infiltrate that Leviathan and plant a sabotage device that Tina had constructed, an electromagnetic virus that could disrupt the battleship's shield and weapon control systems. If they managed to do that, Earth's scattered militaries might have a shot at launching simultaneous attacks from the ground. Then, hopefully, the battleship would fall, or at least retreat. Miraculously, they were allowed to dock without immediate challenge. presumably because the stolen craft's transponder was still recognized. Upon landing in a cavernous hangar, the team prepared for close-quarters combat. The hangar was filled with similarly shaped vessels, some larger, some smaller. Alien workers, or possibly automated drones, moved crates along the deck. As soon as the ramp lowered, Elena's group launched their assault. At close range, the hybrid rifles their engineers had built, combining ballistic force with alien power cells, proved brutally effective. The defenders, caught off guard, scrambled to organize. Green energy bolts flew overhead, scorching the stolen ship's hull. Humans returned fire in lethal bursts, the new guns punching through chitinous armor. The clang and echo of battle reverberated across the hangar walls. Elena led the charge toward a corridor that matched the corridor on their half-translated schematic. They had mapped out a possible route to the battleship's core. If they could plant the device there, the virus would spread. 10 minutes of heavy fighting later, they reached a wide door. The corridor behind them was littered with alien bodies and pools of glowing purple fluid. Adam lugged a heavy piece of demolition gear as they forced open the door, stepping into a central control chamber. Rows of consoles shaped like organic pods lined the walls, and an enormous transparent viewport looked out upon the star-speckled void. At the far end of the chamber stood a tall alien in elaborate plating, flanked by soldiers. Its angular, menacing face glared with something that almost looked like scorn. This, Elena realized, had to be the ranking commander, Grand Commander Ixath, if the intelligence was correct. Ixath clicked and hissed in a flurry of its language, presumably issuing an alarm or a summons. Before they could shoot, a barrage of energy blasts erupted. The humans dove behind a console, returning fire. Elena's ears rang with the cacophony. She crawled around the console, taking aim at one of the soldiers. The shot found its target, toppling the alien. Ixath hissed more commands, and additional aliens stormed in from side passages. The situation grew dire. Tina ducked behind an outcropping, rummaging in her pack for the sabotage device. She needed to attach it to the battleship's central node, presumably located in the console bank near Ixath. "We have to push forward," Elena shouted, choking on the tang of burning metal. Adam and Huang exchanged glances, then nodded. They unleashed covering fire, momentarily forcing the defenders back. Ixath swiped at a console, calling up a defensive barrier across half the chamber. The barrier shimmered in translucent red. Elena realized they had mere seconds to reach that console before the barrier locked them out entirely. Simon Huang hurled a fragment grenade, the small device clattering over the deck before detonating with a thunderous boom. Shrapnel tore through the nearest aliens, and Ixath shielded its face from the blast. That was the opening. Elena sprinted across the open floor, ignoring the scorching beams that grazed her armor. She vaulted a toppled console, sliding in behind Ixath's dais. The alien commander whirled on her, raising a staff that crackled with raw energy. She fired her rifle point-blank. The round struck Ixath's torso, leaving a smoldering wound. The staff discharged wildly, blowing a chunk out of the wall. Ixath staggered, mandibles flailing with a shriek that sounded more outraged than pained. Tina dashed up, sabotage device in hand. She slapped it against the central node, hooking wires into the alien circuitry as best she could. The device's lights blinked to life. "Uploading virus," she yelled. "Just need a few seconds." Ixath, wounded but still functioning, made a desperate lunge for them. Elena wrestled with the alien staff. She felt Ixath's raw strength, but the commander was injured, purple fluid drenching the floor. Adam arrived, tackling Ixath from behind, slamming the butt of his rifle into the alien's head. Ixath went down, struggling feebly. Meanwhile, the device beeped in rapid succession, then blinked green. Tina let out a whoop. Done. That should disable their control and drop the shields across the entire battleship. Elena reached for her earpiece. "All forces, this is Colonel Cruz. Initiate planetary strike if you can. Their shields are going offline." She doubted many ground units had the capacity to strike orbital targets, but some installations might still have partial missile capability. The chamber's lights began flickering. On a central screen, multiple sections of the battleship turned red, signifying system failures. Emergency shutters slammed down. Over loudspeakers, a chaotic chorus of alien voices signaled a catastrophic meltdown. "Time to go," Adam shouted. He and Tina helped Elena pry the staff from Ixatha's grip. The alien commander let out a final hiss. Then they fled, collecting what survivors of their squad they could. By the time they made it back to the stolen transport, the battleship was in a death spiral. Explosions rocked the hull, and corridor lights dimmed. The trip through the docking hangar was easier than expected. Alien defenders were too busy trying to contain fires and structural breaches. The humans piled into the craft, patched up the worst damage as best they could, and tore free from the hangar's magnetic clamps. Outside, Earth's battered surface sprawled below, but so did the flicker of missiles rising from hidden bases, each contrail glinting in the sun. The battleship's mighty silhouette convulsed with internal blasts. Lances of energy flailed in random directions. Then, with a final series of bursts, the monstrous vessel tore itself apart. Metal and organic debris scattered across orbit in a cataclysmic storm of fragments. Earth's defenders had done it. Their stolen transport, barely functioning, re-entered the atmosphere at a dangerously steep angle. Tina wrestled once again with the alien controls, sweat pouring down her face, ignoring the temperature alarms that threatened to incinerate them on re-entry. They punched through dense clouds, engines sputtering as they soared over a mountainous region. They crash-landed in a wide valley, carving a deep trench in the earth, sending up plumes of rock and soil. When the craft finally screeched to a halt, battered but mostly intact, the survivors stumbled out, coughing from the smoke. Emergency teams from nearby bunkers rushed in to help them. Elena collapsed to her knees, feeling the sting of countless bruises and a deep exhaustion. But it was worth it. They had struck a lethal blow at the heart of the alien invasion. News soon spread across the battered remains of civilization. The main alien command ship had been destroyed, and smaller alien vessels were in disarray. The orbital bombardment slowed, then ceased. Over weeks of ensuing battles, human forces exploited every sign of alien weakness. One by one, the secondary ships were captured or shot down by emerging pockets of well-coordinated militaries. The aliens fought with fierce resistance, killing scores more humans, but their momentum was broken. Earth's defenders rallied. Guerrilla cells became armies. The bungled attempt to exterminate humanity had ended with the invaders forced to recall their battered remnants. Eventually, a universal surrender message was broadcast from the last functioning alien flagship. Their planetary invasion was undone by what they had deemed an inferior species. On a blasted plain outside the ruins of a once bustling city, Colonel Elena Cruz and General Donovan met with the alien overlord who had replaced Ixath, an official covered in elaborate carapace filigree. Surrounded by armed human soldiers, the overlord was coerced into signing a formal treaty of capitulation. The document was short, its language as stripped and severe as the blackened wasteland in which it was signed. The alien empire would withdraw, cede certain technologies, and agree never to approach Earth again. Standing near the overlord, Elena felt no triumph, only grim resolve. Millions, maybe 1 billion or more, had died. So, many cities and families wiped out. Yet humanity had survived. In the months that followed, engineering teams labored tirelessly to adapt the captured alien vessels for reconstruction and defense. The planet still bore the scars of near annihilation, cratered wastelands, shattered infrastructure, and a grief that would echo for generations. But from the ashes, a new unity emerged. Former nation-states that once bickered realized they had to stand together. Scientists from every corner of Earth collaborated on rebuilding, learning from the advanced alien technology that had so nearly obliterated them. And amidst all this, Colonel Elena Cruz, now a pivotal figure in the new Global Defense Council, found herself staring at the night sky with a mixture of awe and apprehension. If these aliens had thought humans to be insects, how many other civilizations might hold Earth in similar contempt? The galaxy was vast, and this entire disaster had proven that humankind was neither alone nor guaranteed safety in the cosmic neighborhood. Still, there was hope. If humans could outlast a technologically advanced empire that wielded planet-killing beams, what else could they achieve? They had discovered within themselves a capacity for resilience and innovation, a refusal to yield even when faced with total extermination. The next generation of children, raised in bunkers and battered cities, grew up hearing stories of the courageous men and women who refused to be squashed like bugs. Those tales became modern myths, teaching that no foe, however mighty, was invincible. One evening, as she walked along the perimeter of a rebuilt settlement high in the Rockies, Elena spotted the hazy glow of an old starship drifting in low orbit, a captured alien vessel that Earth's new united forces were refitting. The sight made her heart swell with fierce pride. They were no longer restricted to the Earth. In time, they would venture out into the stars themselves. The name of that vessel was scrawled in white paint on the hull, Humanity's Claw, a reminder that if anyone else tried to stomp Earth underfoot, they would find out exactly how sharp that claw could be. The overlord the humans had captured was occasionally brought out to deliver warnings to other potential invaders. In the dismal corridors of a newly established research station, the captured alien was forced to watch as Earth scientists dismantled advanced weapons and twisted them into new designs, building an arsenal never seen before. The Overlord's mandibles quivered when it realized that the species it had once labeled as mammalian insects now possessed technology that rivaled anything the Empire had. Over time, human ambassadors would even travel to the remains of the alien Empire's domain to enforce the peace treaty, or perhaps to engage in uneasy diplomacy. On a crisp morning, Elena arrived at the half-finished starport near what used to be Denver. Enormous scaffolds supported a half-dozen alien hulls, each in different stages of modification. Crews bustled everywhere, welding, testing engines, installing new weapon systems. General Donovan stood next to a portable command station, checking fuel inventories. He glanced up as she approached, nodded in greeting. "You're looking well, Colonel," he said. She smiled softly. "I'm just thankful we got this far." Her eyes roamed across the starport, where men and women of every background worked side by side. "Are we planning to keep going?" she asked. Donovan gave a wry grin. "We are. Our new alliance wants to see what's out there. Make sure no one else tries what these bastards did. We can't stay cowering at home, waiting for the next invasion." She knew he was right. So did she. With each passing day, Earth was transforming. Battered, but not broken. It evolved into a planet unified by shared trauma and shared resolve. The bunkers that had once served as desperate refuges were now repurposed into research labs or training academies. Soldiers trained with advanced exoskeleton suits gleaned from the aliens' designs. Pilots learned to navigate zero gravity by practicing in the gutted remains of massive alien troop transports. And the children who had once scurried underground like frightened animals emerged into a world that, though battered, promised them the stars. In time, people would no longer recall the old rivalries, the petty borders. Instead, they remembered how the aliens had come, condescending, convinced that humans were an inferior species to be eradicated. They remembered how the skies burned red with orbital strikes, and how the ground trembled under monstrous weapons. But most of all, they remembered how those so-called insects fought back, refusing to concede. They remembered the nerve of a species that could take a cosmic weapon and turn it on its owners. They remembered Colonel Elena Cruz, Sergeant Adam Parker, Specialist Tina Nguyen, Private Simon Huang, General Donovan, names etched into the collective consciousness as symbols of unstoppable defiance. And so, the sign at the starport's main entrance read in bold letters, "Aliens called human insects." They had no idea what was coming. It stood as a testament to the invasion, a memorial to the fallen, and a warning to any future foe. The atmosphere near the sign always carried a solemn hush, as visitors paused to reflect on the cost of that victory. Yet there was also a sense of pride in humanity's capacity to rise to a challenge beyond imagining. Sometimes a few of the surviving aliens, mostly prisoners turned over for diplomatic negotiations, would pass by that sign, escorted under guard. They would twitch nervously at the images on display. Photographs capturing the devastation they had wrought, the gallant stands humans made, the triumph of capturing an alien battleship in orbit, and the final signature of surrender. The aliens' compound eyes would shift with what might have been fear or regret. They had once seen themselves as the galaxy's apex civilization. In the end, their downfall had come at the hands of an unbroken species they labeled as pests. Months bled into years, and the planet's battered ecosystems began to heal. Reconstruction efforts advanced. Beneath the steel and alloy plating of new starships, flowers pushed through scorched soil. Children attended newly reopened schools, where the curriculum blended the old Earth sciences with fragments of alien technology. Elena, promoted and recognized as a global hero, found herself wishing sometimes for a return to simpler days. She had never won a cosmic war, but if it had to be waged, she was proud of how Earth had responded. She'd seen ordinary men and women transform into extraordinary heroes under unimaginable pressure. On the anniversary of the invasion's end, crowds gathered in the remains of what had been a major capital city, now in the process of being rebuilt. At noon, a hush fell over the thousands of survivors, soldiers, engineers, and former refugees. Together, they lifted their gaze skyward. High above, Earth's new defense fleet, 7 starships forged from repurposed alien hulls, slowly paraded across the stratosphere. Sunlight gleamed off their armor, each bearing the name of a city destroyed in the initial bombardment, ensuring the memory of that sacrifice would endure. The crowd erupted in applause, tears, and a feeling of unity that transcended old boundaries. Elena stood in the front row, next to Donovan, watching those ships. Her chest tightened with emotion, an awe she couldn't put into words. This was the future Earth had claimed, a future among the stars, shaped by tragedy but not defined by it. A future that told the universe humanity was ready for whatever came next. Perhaps she would retire soon, pass the torch to a younger generation. But before she did, one last mission awaited her. An expedition to the alien empire's core, now that it lay exposed. She would command a diplomatic and exploratory envoy, ensuring that no spark of vengeance or hostility would threaten Earth again. It was time to show that while humans could fight like devils, they could also build bridges if the situation allowed. As the ceremony concluded, one final message played across the massive digital screen erected on the site. In multiple languages, English, Russian, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, Hindi, and more, it proclaimed, "We are no one's insects. We are humanity. We survive, we adapt, and we endure." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, letting those words wash over her. She recalled the earliest days of the invasion, how powerless everyone felt when red beams from orbit reduced entire cities to ash. So many times, it looked as though Earth would fall. Yet somehow, they'd turn the tide. Humans were unique in their blend of stubbornness, ingenuity, and sheer willpower. With the ceremony over, Elena made her way through the throng, occasionally stopping to greet old comrades or exchange salutes. She saw Adam Parker, wearing a new uniform and a bright grin. Next to him was Tina Nguyen, who gave a playful wave, her eyes tired but vibrant. Simon Huang was off to one side, quietly enjoying the scene. In that fleeting moment, they shared an unspoken understanding. They had taken the fight to an enemy that presumed them to be helpless. They had lost much, yet gained something immeasurable, a united Earth ready to carve its own destiny among the stars. At day's end, the stars began to glimmer in a violet sky. Elena lingered beneath them, remembering that first horrifying sight of the red beams. Now, however, the night carried promise rather than fear. Overhead soared the silhouettes of new patrol craft, human pilots at the helm, safeguarding the world below. If those who once invaded them tried again, they would face a planet tempered by fire, armed with alien technology and unbreakable spirit. It would be a dark day, indeed, for any who dared consider humans as mere insects again. She touched the metal pin to her chest, though she felt it belonged equally to everyone who had bled, fought, and died to save Earth. Then she turned away, setting her eyes on the sprawling complexes that had risen from ruin. "We've survived the unimaginable," she murmured to the wind. "Now we reshape our future." In the distance, a starship roared as its engines ignited, lifting away from the surface with a roar that echoed across the mountains. Watching it climb higher and higher until it vanished into the night sky, Colonel Elena Cruz smiled. They were not insects. They never had been. And any alien who still harbored doubts would soon learn the truth. Humanity was a force even the galaxy's mightiest powers could no longer ignore.